Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Good Wednesday to you. Welcome to the AL.com recruiting show, the gold standard here on AL.com, brought to you as always by Southern Orthopedic Surgeons, here for the athlete and all of us. As we mentioned last week, Simone Eli, my co-host, is out for a couple of weeks. She did have her baby. Congratulations to her and Coach Sessions. Everything going well there, and hopefully she'll be back with us and in the new year. But again, we have the astute Randy Kennedy from Sports Talk 99.5 joining us, AL.com recruiting analyst as well. How you doing, Randy?
Great. I'm happy to fill in, but I don't want to be a replacement for Simone Eli.
Well, I don't think you can be, but
exactly. I'm not going to
try. But we got a lot to talk about today. Obviously, we're a week away from early signing day, which has basically become the signing day almost. We're going to talk Super 7 a little bit later in the show. Got some highlights of Jeremiah Alexander, the top prospect in the state, and the Alabama commit. But Randy, first off, I want to talk about, because we're only a week away from the early signing day, what I like to call the big three. I mean, the three guys I think a lot of people are talking about right now. Let's start off with Khurtiss Perry. I think we talked about him last week, the Pike Road defensive lineman. We talked about last week, it could be an Iron Bowl battle for Khurtiss. We had Khurtiss on our show a month or two ago. He had a great performance, Randy, in the Super 7. They beat Pleasant Grove to finish an unbeaten season. What did you see in that performance?
Well, I saw that. I think he's the best player in the state of Alabama. He was
really
absolutely dominant, Ben. I just, if I had a vote for Mr. Football or the top recruit in the state, Khurtiss Perry would absolutely be in the discussion for both of those. We've been talking about him for about 4 years. He's got the best get off of anybody I've ever seen at the high school level in terms of you watch the games, and about 4 times during the game you think, well, he had to be offsides that time. But he's not. He's just that quick off the ball. He was dominant in the state championship game, Pike Road, first state championship ever. And the big thing here, Ben, is I think this is a legitimate Alabama versus Auburn battle. And there aren't many of those going on these days. And this is a case where if Auburn were to be able to pull a 5-star guy out of Montgomery there, that would be a huge, huge victory for Brian Harsin in his first real signing class for Auburn.
Yeah, he's he's not that big, Randy, compared to a lot of these other guys, but he's, the first play of the game against Pleasant Grove, he got to the quarterback, didn't sack him, but caused an incompletion. And then by my count, he had 3 sacks, I think, in the first half. The game against Pleasant Grove just really showed out. Looks like he's going to commit and sign about 1 o'clock or sometime right after lunch next Wednesday. Of course, that could change. I mean, like I said, he's kind of a wild card. I don't mean that in a bad way. Just
right.
You never know with him. But it does look like Auburn or Alabama, right? For him, he narrowed it down to 5, but most people think it's going to be one of those two.
It's definitely going to be one of those two. And, I mean, I tend to lean a little bit toward Alabama just because Alabama playing for another national championship or in the playoff and all that Alabama has to offer. But Auburn certainly made an impression there. And after visiting for the Iron Bowl, he loved everything about the visit and said Auburn was his leader. So I think there's still some after effects from that. So that's definitely going to be one worth watching. I think, when we get to signing day, that's going to be one of the big stories in state, but also nationally, one of the top guys that we're not 100% sure where he's going.
Yeah, he's clearly the top uncommitted guy in the state, senior in the state. Probably number 2 overall behind Jeremiah Alexander, although you just heard Randy say he might make him number 1. And by the way, we'll come out AL.com with our final A-list of top prospects, hopefully on Sunday. So look for that. We'll see where he's ranked there. But still following Khurtiss Perry, he is it's an interesting situation. If it's not Khurtiss Perry, Randy, the top uncommitted guy could be Shemar James from Faith Academy. He's a guy we followed for a long time. We've talked about him a lot on this show. Just this week, he was visited by Nick Saban on Monday, was scheduled to be visited by Kirby Smart and Billy Napier on Tuesday. I assume he was. And he also mentioned a couple of other schools to me, but I talked to Shemar just yesterday, so this is a recent interview. And Patrick, by the way, thanks to Patrick Greenfield, our man behind the scene, doing all the hard work for us. But Patrick, let's play a little bit of what Shemar said this week to me, leading up to signing day next week. So who would you say is in it? Have you got it narrowed down?
I'll say it's some schools still in it, like Alabama, Georgia, Florida. I'll say Texas A&M, Nebraska.
Coach Saban was here Monday, right? How did that go?
It went awesome. It's always nice talking to Coach Saban. My mom and my sister talked to him, And we was just talking about, like football and like life after football and just like creating value for yourself.
Nebraska. That's a different one.
It was different. They had came probably last week, and they said they needed a nickel to play, and that kind of like raised my eyebrows a little bit because that was the first. So I mean, I was thinking about Nebraska.
So do you, in the back of your head, even though you're not going to tell me, do you know probably where you're going to go now, or is it really up in the air?
It's pretty, pretty much just overall environment.
All right, so that's Shemar. Interesting that he said Nebraska. That's a team I had not heard from with him. Randy, when you and I talked to him on our radio show last summer, he had committed to Florida. He was really interested in the position they had him in, which was kind of a hybrid linebacker, nickel type position, I guess. But it seems kind of up in there. He said like he has his mind made up. A lot of people think it's Alabama. I think it's probably Alabama or Georgia, but maybe Florida gets back in it. He had not talked to Billy Napier in person, not met him before Tuesday. So where do you think he ends up?
It's interesting, when it was Iron Bowl Saturday, he had a chance to go to watch Alabama and Auburn, which Auburn was still in it at that point, and he chose instead to go see Florida and Florida State, even though Florida didn't have a head coach at the time, which told me, okay, he's definitely got interest in Gainesville as much as he would, let's say, Alabama, who he's still considering. Nick Saban came in. Pete Golding, the Alabama defensive coordinator, was in to see him at Faith Academy. That's a big deal, obviously. But I get the sense Georgia's very much in this thing. He sent out a tweet after the visit this week saying, I'm with my Georgia family here, showing the picture of him with the coaches there. So I think that's very much up in the air. It seems like a lot of what he is, every time you talk to him or somebody else talks to him, he's always gets excited about if people talk about the further away from the ball he could be, which is, when this Nebraska thing came up about, they mentioned I could play nickel. That's exciting. He's not going to Nebraska. But my point being, I think he wants to be a guy who is not a defensive end, but a linebacker, a guy who's in coverage some. And maybe Georgia's got that spot better for him than Alabama does. I'm not sure, but make no mistake, Alabama and Georgia both still very much pushing for him.
Yeah, his high school coach is Jack French, who's been around and been around a long time. And he's told us multiple times, even before his junior year, hey, if I could, I'd like to play him in the secondary. They basically played him on the line because of their needs. But he could certainly play that spot. We'll see. I mean, it's 5 o'clock next Wednesday is when he's supposed to sign at Faith Academy. I think it could go either way. I think he still likes Florida, but I just can't imagine that he's going to go back to Florida after decommitting. And it's been a weird, winding road in the last 6 months for him, leaving Faith, coming back to Faith, getting injured. He looks like he's getting healthy again now, which is good news for him. So we'll be following that as we go up to signing day. And hopefully next week when we have our show, maybe we'll have an interview with Shemar about his decision. So top 2 uncommitted guys there. One guy who's not uncommitted, Randy, but it almost seems like he is, Robert Woodyard, the linebacker from Williamson, has been on the radar for probably as long as any of these guys in this recruiting class, maybe other than Jeremiah Alexander. 4-star linebacker out of Williamson, been committed to Alabama since June of 2020. But the movement is, at least in the last few weeks and months, that, hey, this guy's probably going to end up in the Auburn class. He's not verbally decommitted from Alabama, as far as I know. There's been no talk about that. But I went by and talked to Robert this week, and here's a little bit of what he said. Patrick, if you could just play a little bit of Robert.
He's committed to Alabama for a long time, but it seems like it's Alabama or Auburn. Is that right?
Correct.
Tell me what you like about Alabama.
The atmosphere, the people, it's a different vibe to be a part of the SEC championship. That could be just totally different.
And what about Auburn? What strikes you?
Auburn, the people, just the Auburn family, it's all one. But there's great things at Auburn that can be accomplished.
Sure.
I might have a decision in my mind.
But you're gonna sign. You're gonna sign no matter what on early signing day. Right?
Yes, sir.
What about you? Got to ask you about your health. You missed the last part of the season with a knee injury. Looks like you're about ready to go again. Right?
Yes, sir. I'm about ready to go. It's been a long way. I've been going through it, but I'll be all right. I'm mentally strong, and everything will be fine.
All right, interesting. I mean, Randy, probably the most I don't know if understated is the right word, but just a guy who's not out there publicly, especially for as long as he's been on the recruiting radar. What do you make of Robert Woodyard?
Well, I think he's going to end up in the Auburn class. We made such a big deal about Nick Saban and Pete Golding being in town to visit Shemar James. And, as we didn't make a big deal about that, even though they were right here in Mobile in town. But make no mistake, Robert Woodyard is a great prospect, man. I think he is, if he does end up in the Auburn class as we anticipate, I think he'll be the crown jewel of that class. I think he is a big-time player. I think there's early playing time for Auburn if he goes there. I think he is a all-conference kind of performer. I think he's a really, really good player. And if, in fact, that's where he ends up, that's going to be a major accomplishment for Auburn because I think he can flat-out play.
And I'll say, off the record, Randy, I kind of put down my listening device and said, all right, Robert, just tell me, where you're thinking. And he would not tell me. I get the feeling that he probably wants to probably thinking Auburn, but maybe wants it to be a surprise, even though I don't think it's a surprise right now. But I will say that we know that Brian Harsin, the Auburn head coach, and at least 5 assistants were at Williamson this week. So clearly they want him. And we'll see next week. Don't have a time for his deal yet. Probably will be in the morning on Wednesday. But these are 3 guys that we're following really closely and have been for a long time, and we'll keep following them. It seems like, Randy, I don't know, in the past years, I don't know that we've had such big prospects still kind of waiting to decide on early signing day.
Yeah, and one of them that's already committed that we're kind of saying is going to go to another class. It's kind of crazy.
That's crazy. A couple of other recruiting notes. We're going to get to the Super 7 and especially the Thompson Central-Phenix City game in just a few minutes. But some big-time decommits. We had Bennett Meredith on our show about 6 weeks ago. After Hoover beat Thompson in the final regular season game, he committed to Northwestern. He decommits from Northwestern, the Hoover quarterback. So we'll see what's up with him. And then, as we talked about last week, Randy, the coaching situation with these coaches going all over the place at this time of year. It's all about early signing day. Well, there's just this week, Mario Cristobal leaves Oregon, goes to Miami, and that causes 2 of our guys locally or in state to decommit. Tanner Bailey, the Gordo quarterback, and then T.J. Dudley, the linebacker from Catholic. What do you think about this situation?
Yeah, I think it's a possibility. It could be a windfall for Auburn. I think T.J. Dudley's a guy right there in the backyard in Montgomery. I don't know how hard Auburn has pushed for him, but he certainly is a highly recruited guy. Really, makes a lot of tackles for Montgomery Catholic. So I think you could see him possibly end up at Auburn, though there haven't been a lot of buzz there just yet. The other thing is Oregon is going to get back on the recruiting trail. Now, is it going to be enough in a week or so to be able to get those guys back in their class and salvage that? I'm not sure, but we'll see where that goes.
I just saw something just today before we started that T.J. Dudley had mentioned from the Alabama-Mississippi game that maybe he doesn't sign until February. And I talked to Tanner Bailey the other day. We've had Tanner on the show. Really good guy. Randy, he didn't take any other. I mean, he was all Oregon. He didn't take any other official visits. He went to Oregon. He loved Oregon. And he said to me, Randy, look, I know that quarterbacks are a different recruiting situation because I know that most schools only take 1 or 2 in a class, other than, maybe they take 3 or 4 linebackers or defensive linemen or whatever. I did see today that he got an offer from Indiana, so he may be a guy that doesn't sign early as well.
Yeah, and he gets back to, fans get upset with, a guy's committed, but he's visiting somewhere else. Well, this is why. If you commit to Oregon and you think, well, I'm just going there, I'm shutting it down, this is where I want to go, and then suddenly there are all these changes. Not only do you still want to go there, but do they still want you? And so it's really wise. If I were advising parents or a recruit, keep your options open. Continue to look at, okay, if I don't end up going to my number 1 choice, what other options do I still have open?
Yeah, and I don't say, having talked to both Tanner Bailey and Bennett Meredith and TJ as well, all of them are going to be good representatives for wherever they go. Somebody's going to be fortunate to get those guys. The other thing I wanted to mention, Catholic defensive back Jourdan Thomas flips from Mississippi State to Tennessee. Stays in the SEC, Randy, but he was part of that defense that allowed 43 points total this year.
I just hated it that they didn't make it to the Super 7. So all that talent could be on display. They got upset in the semifinals, but man, they had talent all over the place on that team.
Randy, that's a good transition by you. You seem to know what you're doing there. But we're going to talk about the Super 7 right now. Specifically, I think the Thompson Class 7A game between Thompson and Central-Phenix City. There you see the score. Thompson wins 38-22. three-peat for the Warriors. First time anybody in Class 7A has done a three-peat. What did you think, Randy? What did you see here?
Well, Thompson is just so unbelievably talented on offense and defense. Even if you take the starting quarterback out, who's a Power 5 quarterback, they just don't miss a beat. They're so talented, and unlike at a lot of places, when you got a big time like 5-star recruit like a Jeremiah Alexander, you would think, okay, our whole game plan needs to be about Jeremiah Alexander, how we're going to neutralize him. And then you got Peter Woods, the junior, who may be a higher ranked prospect even than Jeremiah Alexander on that defensive front, and so you just end up with pick your poison. They're so good all over the place, and they did lose that one game to Hoover, but Thompson's still one of the great teams in state history.
There were some interesting storylines there. Connor Harrell, just like last year, the quarterback got hurt in the first half and came back to play this time. Last year he didn't. But here you see Jeremiah Alexander making the sack on Bo Nix's brother, Caleb Nix. And they were just dominant. It was 38-22, but it was 38-8 at one time. I mean, just a dominant showing by Thompson. Jeremiah Alexander's been the number one commit in this class, committed to Alabama, decommitted at one point, but now he's recommitted, obviously. Not going to play in the Alabama-Mississippi game this week, but your thoughts on Jeremiah Alexander, still the prospect we thought he's going to be. What type of player is he going to be at Alabama, Randy?
No, he's going to be excellent. And, I brought up earlier about Khurtiss Perry, maybe the top recruit in the state, but while Khurtiss Perry is dominant on just about every snap, Jeremiah Alexander is dominant and has the measurables that people look for. And that's why he's the number one recruit in this class and, in the running for one of the top recruits in the entire country, because he's productive on the field, but he's also got the height and weight and everything you want out of that basically strong side defensive end. I mean, if you look at how he plays, he's going to rush the passer. He's a terror there, good character guy, hard worker, all that stuff. I mean, he's going to be a great player at Alabama.
Interesting. His buddy Peter Woods on the other side of the defensive line. We had Mark Freeman on our radio show last week on the free iHeart Radio Network. And I said, if you're an offensive coordinator going against those guys, how do you approach them? And what do you say, Randy? I'd double team one and run away from the other, or something like that.
Double team one and read the other. Don't even try to block both of them, because you got to have at least two guys to block them. But Peter Woods, Ben, maybe even more dominant than Jeremiah Alexander, just in terms of brute force and being a strong guy who can play the inside, which this from following recruiting and following high school sports, it's so much more difficult to find a guy who can be a dominant inside guy, which is what Peter Woods is. And so those guys don't come around very often. He may end up being the number one player in the entire country next year, as you see number 11 there making a great play.
It's going to be a good race for number one in our state next year. You got both those guys. You got Tony Mitchell, their teammate, defensive back, Tamarian Parker, and Carmelo English, who they played in that game for Central-Phenix City. A lot of guys, Russaw from Carver, Montgomery, just a lot of studs in that class. Randy, you're going to be covering the Alabama-Mississippi game for us for AL.com on Saturday. What are you looking for there?
Man, I always love covering the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game. The theme this year is big guys for Mississippi. It's going to be interesting to see if Alabama can run the ball against the big guys from Mississippi. They're always big in that state, Ben, but this year you look at the defensive front. Jaheim Otis is a big kid committed to Alabama. Xavier Harris, another big guy on the defensive front, and Aaron Bryant going to Texas. Harris is going to Ole Miss. Those three guys combined average 6'6", 343 pounds. And they're going to be on the field together on the defensive front together. So that's going to be interesting to see with all those big guys. But Alabama's probably got more overall talent in this game, but it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But big guys from Mississippi going to be hard to move them.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the Alabama commits, there's a bunch of them on this team. A lot of them are not going. Jeremiah Alexander is not going to be there. Traquan Fagans is not going to be there. Emmanuel Henderson, the running back from Geneva County, is out as well. Kobe Prentice is going to be there, Alabama commit from Calera. And there's still a lot of star power on that team. Shemar James and Robert Woodyard were both on it, but they're not playing because of injury. So there'll still be a lot to watch for. And, you can follow that coverage on AL.com from Randy over there. Also, I want to tease, like I said earlier, we hope to come out with our final A-list that should be on AL.com on Sunday, ranking this class, final rankings of this current class, the top 15 guys. And we'll be with you next week. We're a little bit unsure of the time. It'll probably be later on Wednesday just to kind of get a recap of what all's going on. But, follow me on Twitter, Ben Thomas Preps, and we'll let you know what time we're going to be on. And, of course, you can follow all that coverage on AL.com. And, Randy, you'll be talking about it as well on your radio show. Tell people how to listen to that.
Yeah, in Mobile, Sports Talk 99.5, or as you said, the free iHeartRadio app every afternoon, 2 to 6. Look forward to talking to you guys then, and check us out there. That's a good way to listen.
A lot to be decided in the next week, Randy. Thank you again to our sponsor, Southern Orthopedic Surgeons, here for the athlete and all of us. Going to be a lot of news coming up in this week, guys, and we'll see you next week. We'll talk all about it.